it's all about team from my perspective, right? There's no one individually. I didn't parachute in here and solve all these problems, and this is why I love talking about this. Guys like Eric, who are able to look at a market like Indonesia from headquarters at Baxter. When I was in Southeast Asia, and he's at headquarters in Illinois, near in Deerfield, Illinois. He's able to look at a market like Indonesia and say, okay, massive population, growth trends, investment by the government in healthcare, really able to see the trends, to find this opportunity for us, and to say, okay, we want to grow our renal business. We want to take a bet on doing something new in a market that no one really wants to pay attention to quite yet, and work together to paint a vision.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
If you've been with your organization for any length of time, you probably notice that things just tend to get more complex. Your organization likely just adds more and more on top. A new tool, a new channel, a new team, a new responsibility is much more rare to actually subtract. I like to think of those as the barnacles that just kind of grab onto the ship of your marketing organization. But it is the rare but brave marketing or business leader who will argue for less in that strategy meeting or planning session, which is why a lesson I read in a podcast guest application recently really stuck out to me. You should almost always do less than you think. I love that, and I can't wait to hear the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories from our guest today, Jake Watts, the Vice President of Marketing for PDI. Thanks for joining us, Jake.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, let's go through your backgrounds. I'm just cherry picking from your LinkedIn, a lot of good stuff here. You say philosopher by training and marketer by choice. You have a BA in philosophy from Columbia University. You were a digital strategy consultant at Scholastic early in your career, digital product manager at Zions Bank Corporation, summer marketing associate at Danaher, while you were getting your master's in integrated marketing communications at Northwestern. You were group manager and associate director of strategy and business model innovation at Baxter International, director of marketing and business innovation at Beckett Dickinson, VP of business model innovation at GAF, and now you are the vice president of marketing at PDI. Long career. Probably learned a lot. Can't wait to hear about it. But let's talk about your current role here for a second. As head of healthcare marketing for PDI, Jake oversees a team of 8 marketing professionals. PDI is a privately held third-generation family-owned company. It currently has 1,000 employees, and over 75% of U.S. hospitals trust PDI for surface disinfection. So give us an idea, Jake. What is your day like as vice president of marketing at PDI?
Yeah, good question. It's incredibly exciting here at PDI. We are leader in surface disinfection and infection prevention. Phenomenal family company. My day consists a lot of simplification, of taking the complexities of what we do from a portfolio standpoint, from a human standpoint, and trying to boil these down to the essentials, right? What are the highest priority tasks that we're trying to see accomplish as an organization? So right now it's deep thinking about where the market's going, where our portfolio needs to go. Who are the right type of people that we need to have on the team to be successful? How do we help the people who are on the team, really achieve their best and deliver, what they've committed to deliver, and really to run the business day to day and help our customers be successful with our leading products.
Great. I think a lot of challenges that our audience is facing too. So it'll be interesting to hear what you learned from your career to be able to address those challenges and what you're doing today. So let's jump into some lessons you learned from your career. The first lesson you said is you never have the right answers to begin with. So how did you learn this? Yeah,
so I had the pretty unique opportunity of living in China for 3 years. And that was facilitated by my work at Baxter Healthcare. So I was part of a leadership rotational program when I joined Baxter out of graduate school. And as my second rotation, I chose to go to China. It had never been done before, but I had this aspiration of living in China, working in China. My father had lived in Taiwan for a couple of years back in the late 70s. And so it was kind of part of my blood, and I wanted to go there and have a new challenge. And so as part of that rotational program, I was able to join a newly formed team in China called the Business Model Innovation Team for Baxter. And the intent of that team was to use the tools of lean startup essentially to find new innovations for the Chinese market that could potentially be exported to other emerging markets and also potentially back to the United States. So a little bit of reverse innovation. So that was the intent of the team. We did the traditional again, business model innovation process or lean startup process, where we really got deep within the market to understand the customer's needs. We were focused on the renal business, so anything involving dialysis was part of the business unit I was involved in, and also our fluid systems business, so or medication delivery. So part of the team that I joined was, from the very get-go, get parachuted into China, don't speak the language, don't understand the culture very well, don't know anyone. And at that time, I was the only foreigner in the office, and just was immediately embraced by the organization and by the team, and had the chance to really dive in with the hypotheses we had to try to create new businesses and get in the market and start testing immediately, testing what might work, testing what would resonate with customers. And so that's kind of where my lesson comes from, and I can get more in depth here. But what I learned was that you go into a new situation, or you go into a new marketing challenge with answers already in your head. You have these pre-built frameworks, you have these ideas of, hey, here's what worked in the past in my previous role, I'm just going to lift and shift and go and solve the same problem. And what I learned in jumping into this team and being there for 3 years was that what I came to the table with was almost always wrong. The answers I thought the customers needed, or the product that I thought the customers needed, or the solution they needed, was almost always wrong, because I brought my preconceived notions to the table of what they needed, and in bringing these potential solutions to them, they automatically, almost initially, the first response, and this is what I love about the people in China that I encountered, they would almost always tell you how wrong you were from the get-go, and I love that. I came to love that honesty and that candor, and so that's a lesson that really sticks out to me in marketing and for my career is you just never have the right answers at first, and so you should go out in the market and learn quickly.
Was there anything specific about you being an American going to China and, very different culture, different economy, all these things that you had to overcome, or a challenge you had, and then you figured a way to overcome it? Because I love your lesson. I mean, I've interviewed so many marketers on here, and this is a very common theme. This is a common theme if you're in the same country or industry or all these things. So I wonder, that extra challenge of being an American going to a very different culture and economy, is there any tip you have if any of our listeners are about to go over in China and try to launch a new product or try to learn about potential customers?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons. It's we come, if you're American, right, you come with this framework of all the products we've created in the States here, our corporation, these are the best products, they solve the problem the best, and people should pay for them based on how we built this model, and we can just literally bring it here and everyone will welcome us, with open arms and say, thank you so much, I've been missing this product my whole life. That's just not true. It's because I think that there's just fundamental assumptions that I had and others have, as you come over to any emerging market, right? I spent time, and we'll talk about this, I spent time also in Southeast Asia, a lot of time in Indonesia. It's just the case that people expect different things of products. They hire, I'm a big advocate of the job to be done framework that, learned from Clayton Christensen, and I'm sure other guests have shared, but they have different jobs to be done, right? And they're not necessarily the same jobs as those in developed markets. They may be connected, but the truth is that from my perspective, oftentimes in the States, we only look through the lens of functional jobs to be done, right? So my current role, in as VP of marketing and at PDI, where we're deeply focused on the jobs to be done for our customers in the infection prevention space and surface disinfection, a lot of it becomes a functional challenge to solve. How quickly can you kill a bug? How quickly can a room be disinfected? These are very functional jobs to be done. But what I found in my time in Asia was that oftentimes there were social and emotional jobs to be done that were connected to the product that weren't accounted for in a developed market type product that you would lift and shift to another market. And I can get more in depth in what I mean by that. But
could you have any examples of the social emotional?
Yeah, so I had the just amazing opportunity to help create and lead a program where we created a peritoneal dialysis device that was intended to be used in the home. So if you know anything about peritoneal dialysis, as opposed to hemodialysis happens in a center, right? Because the blood has to, to be very simple about it, the blood has to be cleaned. When you're in the peritoneal dialysis happens in the home, and the patient administers that to themselves. Well, if you know anything about peritoneal dialysis, you know some of the really important jobs to be done beyond just, hey, I want to do this therapy, is my environment, my home is a source of infection, right? And I'm terrified of getting an infection, because infection can lead to greater complications. In addition, many of those that we encountered in China in building this device, and I'll get more into what this device was, is many folks in China who were doing peritoneal dialysis were older, and they had younger children who were deeply concerned about whether this therapy was being done correctly, and their parents or grandparents were being safe in using this. And so as part of designing this solution, we started to think about ways that we could inform caretakers who weren't there, that the therapy was being done correctly by their parents or their grandparents in the home using digital technologies. So the caretakers had this emotional job to be done, which is, I need to know grandma, grandpa, my dad is safe in doing this right, while the user themselves also needed to make sure they were doing the correct steps and avoiding getting any infections or other complications from doing this therapy.
Okay, and that's to marketing specifically. There's some good lessons there, but I just wonder, like, at a just general business or personal level, did you have any like adventures over there from just I don't know, cultural differences or anything going on?
Yes, there's plenty of adventures when you go to a place where the food is new, where the language is new, where the culture is new. A lot of people ask me, do you miss it? And I said, I deeply miss my time in China, because I felt like every day you would be learning something new or seeing something that you had never seen before, So, a great story here that in retrospect is hilarious, but at the time was a little bit interesting to understand, given the cultural difference. Was a colleague of mine and I went out to pitch as we're working on all these new concepts, these new business models that we're going to build for Baxter. Is we went out to a place called Luoyang, and near where the Longmen Grottos are. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's these ancient statues in these grottos, and there was a hospital nearby that we're going to pitch our services to. Well, it turns out that the woman who was going to help us build the software component of this solution was also working for our competition, who was pitching to the hospital president and their board for this solution as well. So we had a person that we thought was part of our team was actually working for both teams who were pitching the same hospital. And so my colleague, who may have been a little over creative and overzealous at the time, said, "Oh, I'm going to take advantage of my colleague Jake's naivete about our culture and how things are working. So we'll do a very long lunch. So we went and did this. We took this woman who was part of this software team working for both sides. We did this very long lunch, and then I said, hey, there's this UNESCO World Heritage site that's not too far from here. I'm gonna kick myself if I don't go to this place and see it. We had 4 or 5 hours until we had this appointment with the hospital, and so my colleague said, "That's great. Let's get a driver and let's go out there." So we went out there, and he said to this woman, "Hey, we're gonna go out there, and we're gonna go see this. He's a foreigner. He's never seen this before, and we're gonna show him this and give him a great experience." And so everyone kind of went along with it. But as we're at the grottos, we get a phone call from my boss, who's of course upset, saying, "Hey, the competition who's supposed to be presenting right now is saying that you've kidnapped their software developer, and they're going to call the police." So here I am, seeing this beautiful UNESCO World Heritage site, basking in these beautiful Buddhas. And my boss is saying, "Hey, you're being accused of kidnapping someone, and the Chinese police are going to be called, and you better get back, get your back to the hospital as soon as possible, because this could get nasty pretty soon." So we went back. There was an interesting kind of altercation with the other company. We went and pitched the business, and we won it, and unfortunately for the other guys, they lost it. But just a kind of misadventure over there where my naivete and culture met my colleagues' creativity and these interesting cultural touchstones that you don't get. You certainly doesn't happen when we're going to talk to Kaiser or anything like that around here. So just a phenomenal experience. There's dozens of experiences like that where I look back personally and just say the business wasn't just like, let's hit a number. It was fun. It was an adventure. It was, let's go figure out what customers want. Let's build something new. Let's build a new dialysis device for the home. Let's go pitch a new solution to a hospital in the middle of nowhere, and get in a little bit of fun trouble. That's what I genuinely miss about the marketing profession there, and my time there was, it was exciting. It was creative. It was kind of, you're living on the edge and you're just kind of making it up as you go. There's something that's really refreshing about that. And that's what I miss about my experience in Asia.
Well, that's something too when you're about business innovation that I think people are looking for. But I think the challenge, and this kind of ties into your next lesson when we do that, it's always just maybe adding something else on top. Yeah. So I like this lesson. You said you should almost always do less than you think. So it sounds nice, but one, we live in a culture of more. And two, I was also thinking there's just no shortage of agencies and vendors and tools and platforms and new innovative technology that are reaching out on LinkedIn, knocking on your door, trying to get in there. So how did you learn this, and how do you actually live up to you should almost always do less than you think?
By the way, this lesson always makes you unpopular, right? Because it's incredibly easy to do more, right? It's incredibly easy to say yes. If you've spent any time in innovation or product development, or whether that's on software side or device side or product side, everyone wants to add another feature. Everyone wants to do another project that they heard that some customer wants or sales requested. Everyone wants to be able to do those things. And by the way, as a marketer, you want to be the good guy, right? You want to be the guy who's providing the materials, or the girl who's really delivering for sales, or really creating something new, or creating a splash in the market. And those feelings and those aspirations are real. What I've found, though, whether it was my time in Asia building new products or solutions, or my time, as in my current role in doing, the VP of marketing, where we really straddle the line between new product creation and leveraging the products we have into market and driving business growth, is that if you're not disciplined enough, just like there's scope creep in any, I worked for agencies earlier in my career, and there'd always be scope creep. Clients would always take advantage. I think there's something that happens. There's idea creep. There's resource creep. And I think one thing we've done phenomenally well here at PDI is really focus on what what matters most to our business financially, and more importantly, what matters most to our customers, right? So we've been able to really look at our business, look at the list of, we have a list of 50 different potential new products that we could bring to market, or 30 different campaigns we could execute. But we've really taken a hard look, and really practiced what we preach of essentialism, right? So there's that great book by Greg McKeown where he talks about essentialism, right? Our highest priority tasks. And, and the discipline of saying no. And so our company, with me and with our leadership team and, the great people in our marketing and communications team have really just looked at the scope of all that we can do. And we've looked at the projects that are being proposed, and we've really asked a simple question is, what is our highest priority task? Which programs, which projects are going to yield the most for our customers, for our sales team, and ultimately for the business. And so we've been really disciplined about that. And, to me, that constraint alone is really important in running a business and being disciplined about portfolio creation and really, team development, all the above. That essentialism is key.
One other place I've seen that scope creep is in messaging, is in the marketing messaging itself. So I wonder how you kind of keep that reined in at PDI. Because, for example, we have a free marketing course, and in one of the lessons, Flint McLaughlin teaches, remember that the customer is a subject and your offer is the object. And in B2C products too, but especially in complex products, B2B products, my gosh, you go to their webpage, look at their marketing, they're just talking about themselves. They're going on and on and on. Yeah. So I love one word you said in real quick when you were introducing your day, that simplification. So how do you take that simplification into the messaging?
So this may sound a bit silly, but I tell I was working on a brochure the other day with a phenomenal colleague. We're launching a new product here in March, and the rubric I use is, if I'd explain this to my father, who knows nothing about, and he knows what I do, but he knows nothing about the products, or if I'd explain this to my mother, how would I do that? How would I do it in a way that they understood what exactly I'm doing? Now, this is not going to work in every case. Of course, if it's highly technical, you're going to have to, spell it out. We work with the EPA and the FDA, and, you can't talk to them as you talk to your dad, right? Like, it doesn't work. However, I found it to be a very helpful mental model for me, which is, if I'm going to create messaging for a nurse or an infection preventionist, how do I make it as simple and as straightforward as possible that tells them about what this product will enable them to do? This goes for presentations. We all know that, working in any corporation, PowerPoint becomes a language of the way the business is done. It's, again, simplification. How do you make this as comprehensible and as easy to digest as possible? And I always have my father, my mother sitting on my shoulder saying, Jake, this makes no sense. And so I'm always trying to like push messaging or push the way we lead and communicate through the lens of simplification.
Yeah, I love that. Have you ever actually tried to sit down, I don't know, Thanksgiving and talk? Yeah. So one thing I found with the jobs we have today, like my mom is like, how is that a job? Like, is that, just like, have you actually talked to them through and like?
Yeah. So it's funny. Last summer, I was with my mom and dad, and my mom always asks this question. I think, every other year. Now, remind me what it is that you do. Yeah. Because she wants to go tell her friends and be proud of me, and I love that, right? And so I'm like, okay, how do I make this really simple as possible, right? And I had those conversations with my parents, and, walking them through the storytelling. Here's the problem that customers have. Here's how our product solves that customer need or problem. How our product addresses that, and here's the result. Like, being as simple as possible. I get the head nod. My dad's a builder and developer. He doesn't know anything about surface disinfection or healthcare, but he knows what it means to solve a problem. He knows what it means for a customer to have a problem and for you to deliver on a need and to create an outcome. Like, he understands that. And so, I don't know, maybe it's a silly way that I've kind of got to simplification for my own life and career, but I found it to be incredibly useful.
I like it. It's a great shortcut. Speaking of solving problems, you also mentioned you don't need to go looking for good ideas. They're already in your organization. So how did you learn this? What kind of problem were you trying to solve?
So, look, I mean, all those who listen to this podcast will know how many consultants you've hired in your career to go find, new ideas, only to, 3 or 4 weeks later, bump into someone who's been in the organization for 10 years or 8 years or whatever. It says, I actually tried that 10 years ago, and here's what we learned. Like this is like almost like a law of gravity, right? Like it's almost like a nature's law, which is anytime you go out to look for a new idea for an organization or a new product or a new business model or whatever, it's almost always the case that someone has thought about it in your organization or tried it or implemented or something has happened that way, right? And so what I've kind of learned is that most good ideas are already in the organization. They're hidden in the closet somewhere. They're in a file drawer somewhere. They're in the kind of institutional tribal knowledge of an organization. I have a number of different experiences with this. One that really spoke to me is, my time at Becton Dickinson when we were trying to both create new devices for our interventional care business and to look at pricing, was that we resurrected an old model that had been created around pricing tiers and, floors and ceilings. I mean, this is not, pricing floors and ceilings is not like this esoteric idea or esoteric model of being a marketer and creating value for a company and for customers. It's a very simple way of having discipline around pricing. Now, so when I was at Becton Dickinson, for example, phenomenal company, great products, worldwide. So if you have a worldwide business where you're selling products all over the world and you have all these folks who are autonomous in their business units in different countries, they're going to start creating their own pricing models, right? So and then pricing is now going to start to, as another law of nature here, pricing is now going to start to go all over the place. And so I had the opportunity there to work with a phenomenal pricing leader as a marketer and to sit down and say, okay, pricing's off in Brazil, pricing's off in, some of these other key markets. Let's look, is there any old work that we've done that could go and to refine those pricing tiers and pricing models to create profit and to really anchor to where our customers are and the value that our products are creating. So he and I, resurrected this old Excel model that someone had built, brilliant model, wasn't implemented. And we were able to take that, ingest all the data, from that we had worldwide on pricing for a particular portfolio. And we're able to now go and nail pricing tiers and find millions of dollars in upside in value just by seeing where pricing had gone wrong across our portfolio and across our countries. And what it really taught me was that as much as, look, I get the desire to come into an organization new, or at your organization you want to do something big and splashy, and oftentimes that means hiring someone who has a big brand in the consulting space, and because it makes you look like you're doing something. But oftentimes, the most successful marketers, the most successful business people I know are really good about treasure hunting in an organization for things that people have tried and maybe not gotten right, or things that are sitting there that could create value, and they're able to find kind of the diamonds in the rough, stitch them together and execute them in a way that's a lot faster, it's a lot cheaper, and it creates the value we're looking for anyways. So many lessons there, but I just learned that the answers, oftentimes the idea is already there. You just need to be a good treasure hunter, right? You need to go find them.
I like treasure hunter. That's a nice one. But also, one thing I learned earlier in my career, like as an outside consultant, is first I'd come in and be like, "Oh, there's a brilliant idea," and we did that, And so I've learned, like, if you any outside consultants listening, ask as much as you can before of the situation what they already did, because it seems brilliant. It's obvious they've probably already tried it, right?
Yeah, there's always that one and as you're an outside consultant, there's always that one person in the organization that's maybe a little, rough around the edges, tough to deal with, who's been there for a long time, who's like the institutional knowledge person. We have one on my team who's just phenomenal person who like literally can remember, oh, I've been here 30 years. I remember when, Mr. Johnson tried this, 20 years ago, and here's what we learned. And like finding those people to me is like the first person you'd go to. Tell me who's been here the longest so I can start to kind of just digest that history before you go and try anything new.
Okay, Jake. So now you realize I have to play devil's advocate because we probably just lost half our audience because half our audience is consultants and agencies and stuff. So I'm going to ask, and I'm going to give you some positive examples. I'm going to ask, when do you bring in outside agency and consulting help, right? And I'll give you two quick examples from my own career. One, this nonprofit called the Bear Foundation we worked with. It was founded by a minor league pitcher, and what he did is seems very simply just put signs in minor league baseball stadiums with missing children, and if you saw those children, then obviously they're getting found. And our team, it's as simple as an A-frame sign, and we brought a total outside perspective, optimized that sign, we found more missing children, right? So that's simple, so imagine the complex. But one other quick example too, when you mention, well, we've done that before, we've done it before 18 months ago, 20 months ago, 20 years ago. I was talking to a company about their TV ads, and they were it was a security company. And so there were these very entertaining ads, but also I didn't feel like it hit on what a security company needed, which they didn't want entertainment about a funny burglar. Like, hey, if your neighbor's home got broken into and you're about to go out of town on a business trip, you're scared your wife and kids are okay. Are you going to buy the funny ad? And they'd be like, oh no, we tested and it's good, we're sticking with the ad. And then you go a level deeper and it's like, how did you test? Oh, you tested with a focus group. So if you're in the mall or whatever online and someone gives you a $20 gift card and you sit there, I would rather see the entertaining ad. But that's not the customer experience where, again, your neighbor's home got broken into or my wife and kids okay. So let me ask, in fairness, when do you bring in the outside consultant agency and that expertise and that different viewpoint?
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Look,
and I'm glad you said what you said because it's so true. It's so true. It's important for everyone to hear. We get oversold by consultants, but when do you bring them in?
Yeah, look, I mean, I have great friends that are consultants, worked for agencies early in my career. And so they are essential to do very, particular things and bring a different perspective. I think there's four things that come to mind for me. Oftentimes, let's start with the idea itself. Oftentimes the time is just not right for an idea, right? Maybe 10 years ago when, Mr. Johnson tried this, it just wasn't right. Timing wasn't right for a market. You didn't do as much of in-depth research in the right way to really develop a product that was hitting a market need. You didn't have product market fit because you didn't do the right work. So I think oftentimes, if you're coming as a consultant and people say, we tried that here, well, that could have been done 10 years ago and the market's different now, right? So that's part of it from my perspective. I also think that you do need people to come in from the outside to have a different perspective. It's very clear, no matter if you're in the best company in the world or a company that's just getting started, oftentimes we only see the world, to an earlier point, we only see the world through our eyes. I studied philosophy as an undergrad, and that is the truth, right? The truth is we only see we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are, right? And so you need people to kind of check that, right? And an organization there can be a gravitational pull around a particular leader's point of view, and so other things cannot be seen. So I think you do need consultants in that instance. And from my perspective, there's two other things. Oftentimes consultants have capabilities that an organization doesn't have, right? And therefore can do the fourth thing, which is to help them execute something that they've found, right? So to me, if you're able to really, and great consultancies do this, if they're able to articulate those value propositions and really understand the customer's need they're trying to solve, whether it's capabilities, that's execution, it's a different perspective, it's helping something that may not be timely or not have been the right time to be timely. I think those are the ways that agencies and outside companies can help an established company realize their vision and create value.
Well put. Well put. And thank you for letting me give you a hard time and take a fair and balanced
Yeah, no,
approach
I
there.
love it. Yeah.
So the first half of the podcast, we talk about lessons we learned from the things we made. That's, I think, a uniquely fun thing about being a marketer. We get to make things. I've never been an actuary or podiatrist, but I don't know if they actually make things. But in the second half, another key thing is the people we make them with. So here are some lessons from the people you have collaborated with. You say boldness and clarity of vision are what motivates teams to sign up for the previously unthinkable. And you learn this from Eric Noche, the Senior Director of Renal Therapy Services at Baxter International. And I think this gets into your time in Indonesia, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, on the face of it, if you're a big multinational company with offices everywhere, Indonesia is not necessarily the most obvious choice to test new models and to launch new initiatives, right? Oftentimes companies are looking to China and India, but Indonesia is a massive market with a massive population, within the top 5 of populations worldwide, young population, very interesting government dynamics, and a market that you don't hear about, right? It's something that people don't pay attention to. And so, look, from the outset, like every team, it's all about team from my perspective, right? There's no one individually. I didn't parachute in here and solve all these problems. And this is why I love talking about this, guys like Eric, who are able to look at a market like Indonesia from headquarters at Baxter. When I was in Southeast Asia, and he's at headquarters in Illinois, near in Deerfield, Illinois. He's able to look at a market like Indonesia and say, okay, massive population, growth trends, investment by the government in healthcare, really able to see the trends, to find this opportunity for us, and to say, okay, we want to grow our renal business. We want to take a bet on doing something new in a market that no one really wants to pay attention to quite yet, and work together to paint a vision of what dialysis and renal therapy services could look like in Indonesia. To me, that takes vision, right? Because it's not the obvious choice. And so what I learned from Eric as we got into this whole adventure, and it was an adventure. There's a lot of adventures in Indonesia that were just as wild as China. Is he was able to take this and paint a vision for leadership that said, here's a place where we need to take a bet, where we need to learn how emerging markets are going to be in the future, and what dialysis could look like in emerging markets. Now, China certainly is an emerging market, and India is too, but those are spaces where multinationals have been playing for a very, very long time. So it wasn't an obvious choice. And so his ability to really articulate a vision, to work with our team to put an action plan around that vision, to be very simple about what the outcomes of this vision could be, to me, were just a lesson of a lifetime about how you inspire people to do unthinkable things, to do something that's not generally accepted, and to just get clarity around what it's going to look like at the end of that vision, getting everyone on board and moving forward. So, something I take with me, and just a phenomenal leader who's had a huge impact on my career.
Well, I wonder too, like, what role does experimentation play when you're trying to get a team motivated about taking something else on? Because not everyone listening is going to be sent to Indonesia, but we're all either as leaders going to have to send our teams into doing kind of the less glamorous products, the newer things, the less exciting things. And one thing I found is when you're in those less highlighted, less spotlighted areas, you can experiment a lot more. And it's fun to experiment because, there's a lot of feedback, you're learning, and it kind of, I've written before about the compounding sequential gains. You learn one thing and you experiment, and you learn another. So either in your own career or when you're managing a team, when you're having to send people into that kind of less glamorous, newer area, like, do you let them experiment more? Have you learned from that experimentation?
Yeah, I love experimentation. Like, I had another phenomenal leader and mentor. Her name is Lisa Rometti. She's at CBS right now. And she said, Jake, always take the dogs.
Yes.
And I thought it was brilliant because, her point was it can only go up from there, right? And no one's going to blame you if on the downside because it's a dog. But what I learned about those kind of under the radar projects, those projects that are unappreciated, is that's really your opportunity to shine as a marketer, to do something that is a little outside the box. You can, as our CEO says here, like, you're on the page, but you can color outside the lines. And the thing I love about that is you can take risks, you can experiment. People give you a little bit more leeway when you're taking on products, programs, initiatives that are dogs, for lack of a better way of saying it. And it's really opportunity to shine, to create impact. One of the things that we talk a lot about as a team, and I think a lot about, is impact. We all have our titles, and those are important. But at the end of the day, the kind of legacy we leave and the roles that we have is the impact that we've created. And oftentimes it's very difficult to realize impact in products or programs that have been established for a very, very long time. It's a percent there, a percent here. It's potentially a new product, it's a tweak on a product. But some of these, unglamorous, assignments or products, whatever it may be, these are opportunities for you to make your mark. And I think, as ambitious people, as people that want to look back on a long career and say, here's all the things that I did, and tell their grandkids and that, hey, I did something, be proud of it. Oftentimes that comes at the things that are just not glamorous. And so, I'm a counterintuitive thinker many times, and so I want those under the radar projects, because I think those are opportunities to prove yourself and to show to others what you can do.
I'll tell you that always take the dogs too when you're making your career choices. A lot of people want to hop onto that hot brand, but at the end of the day, if you were on the rising ship, like, what did you do? Like, it might be a bigger struggle, but finding that brand that needs a turnaround, you know what I mean? I mean, imagine if you were part of the team that turned Apple around, 20 years ago and was heading down, versus, you're joining Apple now. What are you really doing?
Yeah.
Here's another lesson, and I love you. For a guy that works in such a complex field and has worked in complex fields, I love how much you use the term simplicity. You say radical simplicity plus alignment is key to leading large and challenging organizations towards new business models. And you learn this from Chris Rector, the CMO of GAF. How'd you learn this from Chris?
Yeah. Chris is my former boss, just phenomenal person, brilliant businessman. The first thing that really struck me about him, I came from a multinational, tens of thousands of people working there, always putting together, beautiful decks. And don't get me wrong, there's utility in beautiful decks. And the first thing that struck me is how unbelievably simple he made everything. Right. I never remember him. And we'll build up to business models, but I never remember him even the guy's a chief marketing officer, never putting together a deck that had anything more than bullet points. And I know that this seems like a really kind of weird and obscure way of thinking about this, but like, coming from where I came from, which is like almost McKinsey-esque, which has its utility again, and it's essential in some ways to run a business. This guy ran an organization of 100 people by literally boiling down what the key initiatives were, what the key tasks were, what the key things that need to be done to really grow a phenomenal business, to be the leader in roofing manufacturing. And the guy did it through bullet points. And I always think about that, because whenever I get a little bit wild in my, I'm going to put a different font here, or I'm going to create a, shadowed box there, or whatever it is I'm doing in PowerPoint, making them pretty. I just remember Chris who's really key to success was simplification. And then, and connectedly, when you're keeping it simple, was alignment. So he'd always sit me down in his office, and Jake, he's like, I want to talk to you about this Japanese term, nemawashi. He's like, it's about alignment. It's about, getting people on board and helping them to understand your vision and helping bring them along to doing something new. And, someone who came in essentially from all my time in Asia, as I talked about, where it was radical, push the boundaries, break things, try new things, to an organization where a guy was so dialed that it was simple and you had to get everyone on the same page and aligned. That was tough, but he did it through that alignment and that simplicity, because that was the only way that people could sign up to do something new. And to me, it was almost like a paradigm shift in the way I think about how businesses run. And Chris really showed me how that can be done in a phenomenal and successful organization.
Well, I love that you mentioned that about PowerPoint specifically too, because I was, in an organization and I realized at some point, we're spending all this time to make all these nice PowerPoints and we're just showing them to each other. And even if you're presenting to the CMO, it's not the customer. Like the customer doesn't see any of this. It doesn't impact the customer at all. And maybe that's where we should focus and spend less time presenting to each other. But so this just a kind of interesting career trajectory I noticed. So when I look at your career, it seems like healthcare, roofing, healthcare. So you want to share anything about what did that kind of little segue come from?
Yeah, maybe not. We'll see how the next, however many years I got left go. But look, healthcare is a phenomenal space to be in. You are always impacting people's lives for the good, more or less, right? You're doing things that are, our tagline here is be the difference, right? We care about, we have a saying we call it the mother brother, and it's all about all the people that we impact through the products we have. And so I love healthcare. I love what it does for people. Part of me is just kind of looking at a career in healthcare and saying, okay, well, this opportunity came up. Can I do innovation? Can I build a team? Can I test new models? Can I advance an organization in a different direction that's not a healthcare organization? So part of it is almost like a look in the mirror moment to say, hey, you know what, like life's short. Why not try something new? I want to be a person who's always pushing the boundaries and innovating and doing new things. This is an opportunity for me to practice what I preach, right? To look at a new opportunity and to try something different and new. It was a phenomenal experience. It was definitely another kind of fish out of the water moment, like I had been living in Asia for 5 years. But it was my chance to, again, kind of get that rush of being out of my comfort zone and to doing something that I was challenging and that I didn't think I could do.
Well, I wonder, is there anything you learned from that industry that you brought to the healthcare industry that was different? Because one thing, in Marketing Sherpa, we publish a lot of case studies, and people are always looking for case studies in their industry. And sometimes it's like, you send them a case study and they're like, oh, no, I am an OEM parts manufacturer to domestic automakers. That was for an OEM parts manufacturer to foreign automakers. And it's like, open your mind, because I remember once we published a case study on the Obama campaign, and not to be political, but they had done more A/B testing than any other campaign at that point. And I was proud of, there were some people in the audience who clearly weren't in politics, very different industries, but they're like, wow, I learned this and I was able to apply this lesson. So sometimes we're so literal about our industries. Did you learn anything from roofing that you could apply to healthcare?
Yeah. Actually, there's like you'd be surprised about how, it's not a one-for-one connection, but how much I think that infection preventionists are like roofing contractors. So a roofing contractor, they're starting they're a contractor and they want to build their own business. There's like fundamental skills that from going to be a person who puts shingles on a roof to someone owning their own business, there's a whole skill set that a person has to develop to be a business owner. Just like in infection prevention, you can be a nurse, you can have all those experiences, but once you become an infection preventionist, the ability to understand how to run an organization that's dedicated to infection prevention requires massive amounts of skill, right? It's not just knowing the science and all the clinical components. It's learning how to lead an organization. It's having skills that are not necessarily ones that you learn in nursing school or ones that you learn in a graduate program. And so to me, there's a very interesting connection between those two, because we work a lot with infection preventionists, and our ability to help them upskill, help them to become a leader that is looking at a whole organization and managing an organization from infection prevention, to me is one kind of mental model that I brought from roofing into healthcare. And there's others, but that's one that kind of is top of mind for me.
That's interesting, and it's a good reminder that we're all just really humans at the end of the day.
Correct.
Which brings up this last lesson. It's a very hard-hitting, personal, human lesson, so I appreciate you for being open and transparent and sharing it, because I hope it'll help the audience. You said leadership happens outside the boardroom, why empathy is the greatest hidden competitive advantage in organizations, and you learned it from Keen Monson, the CCO of PDI. How did you learn this lesson?
Yeah. So Keen's my current boss, so I'm going to say all kinds of good things about him. But I've worked with him in 3 different organizations, and what I've learned from him is empathy, and it's my feeling that at the end of the day, behind every spreadsheet, behind every new product are people, right? The people in our plant who are phenomenal, who are delivering our products every day, to our clinical people, to the nurses who use our products. These are people who, behind the title have, families, have, tragic experiences that happen in their lives, who have challenges. And to me, what I've learned is that if you want to motivate people, if you want to have them buy into your vision, if you want them to believe in you, right, you have to sit where they are, be with them, understand their challenges at a human level so that you can help them to perform, help them solve their problems, and really help them to shine. Keen and I had a colleague who is one of the best people I've known in my life, not only just professionally, but personally. He had a tragic experience with happened to him and his family, and it was the first week that I had joined the organization and this had happened, and I still remember going with Keen over to this colleague's home and just sitting with him and his family after this tragic accident. And it was that one moment for me that, like, I realized that after all is said and done, no one's going to remember any of the jobs that I did or any of the products I launched. No one will really care about that 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Nothing that will matter. But what I hope they remember, and what I'll certainly remember from this experience with this colleague who had a tragic accident, his family, is that how he felt, how Keen made him feel, how he made me feel, how he made that team and that organization feel. And that's the stuff that people remember. That's the stuff that motivate and inspire people to give their best in an organization. And that's the stuff that really, to me, is the difference between teams that are transformational to an organization and teams that struggle, is that human, empathetic connection. And I really saw that modeled well and continue to be modeled well by Keen in our organization.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So talking about, we're thinking about showing up as a human at work. I wonder, you worked for 5 years in Asia. We mentioned Indonesia, Shanghai, I believe Singapore also. I wonder if you learned anything from that culture that you've taken to how you show up as a human at work. And so, for example, I interviewed Liz Haar, who is a partner at Hinge, on the How I Made It in Marketing podcast earlier. And she worked in Osaka at one point, and her manager took her aside, and he told her, just be. Like, it was very, I guess, Japanese culture lesson, just be. And when I interviewed her, up behind her head, she had this big artwork from Bhutan that she found while she was in Bhutan that said, just be. And she made this her mantra in life. So again, mantra, I never say it right. So again, it's not just, all the great business strategies you've given and simplification, these sorts of things. It's like, how do we show up as humans at work? So is there anything you learned, I wonder, from that Asian culture that really has stuck with you today, and how you show up as a human, how you lead your team, how you go through it all?
Yeah. One of the things I learned this is true in Shanghai, this is true in Indonesia and Singapore, was that the individual and, like, personal quirks that people had that they brought to work, they kind of let those shine. Especially, like, I love Singapore, I love Singaporean people, and I feel like their personalities were always on display. Through their language, the way they talked about things. There was a lot of really interesting people in my office there, in the Singapore Baxter office, and in Indonesia. And they just, like, there was almost a joy in the way they brought themselves to work. And, like, it was them bringing all their kind of unique quirks to work, right? Like, they're just the food they love. They brought all their challenges from home. They talked about all this stuff, and it became part of the way we bonded as a team, as an organization, is because they brought their whole selves to work. So that's what I learned from my time there, and what's kind of translated over into my time now that I've been back from Asia is, all the, like, silly, weird things about me, the philosophy stuff in the background, my kids and my family. I live in New York City, like all the things that I want to airbrush maybe or downplay about who I am, and the things that make me unique. actually our strengths, right? And part of growing up in corporate culture was that I felt like I had to like chop those pieces off and like be a certain mold. Like, hey, you want to be a CMO, like you got to look like this, you got to like talk like this, and you can't say dude and whatever. Like, and now I'm a little bit on the opposite. I probably need to dial it back, but I learned from Singapore. It's like just being yourself. That authenticity, like that shines when you see someone who isn't their self. It is so obvious that they're not being who their authentic self is. And to me, it's very difficult to like lead and to follow a person who you don't feel like you're seeing the whole person. And maybe we're not going to see everything about a person, but you feel like you're getting a real person. And so that's what I learned from Singapore. And I've tried to just try to, maybe, unbutton my collar a little bit, talk about the things I'm interested in, use the random things that I've been reading, as I do my Audible, reading or listening on the way to work or a podcast, just talk about the things I'm interested in, use the stuff I'm interested in. I that quote, we don't see the world as it is, as we are. I read a lot in philosophy. And so, I'll punish my colleagues by quoting philosophy or say, hey, I read this book the other day, and, just really letting myself be who I am and what I care about is one thing that I learned from Singapore, my time in Singapore. And to me, I've just found to be like a really helpful thing to do if you want to be a leader.
And it's so much more fulfilling too, right? So you talk about being a successful leader too, but it's kind of this weird thing. I mean, I think when you're earlier in your career, you feel this uncomfortability of like, you can't really be who you are and you got to, when you walk into those four walls, but what a great thing to be a human being and then to step into those four walls and still be a human being,
Yeah, exactly. Right. And have people who love you for it, leaders who can say, I like her. She's super interesting and quirky and fun. And, good leaders can see that about people and they can cultivate that and to use that to help people to be their best. And so, being that authentic self, I think is so important.
Yeah, I love it. When I first I started my career in a smaller agency, so it was a little easier to be human. But then when I first started working with big software companies, I was on a team with an SVP who just loved Cher. She was the SVP for the Americas, she just loved Cher and she just let everyone know. And she was just big, and it was like, seemed like a silly thing, but I was just like, wow, you can do that, and I loved it. Yeah. Everyone loved her for it. So, all right. So we talked about so many things about what it means to be a marketer from the business leader perspective to the human perspective. If you had to break it down, Jake, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Yeah, look, I think we talked about a few of them, but in my mind, the difference between a brilliant marketer and a good marketer is the ability to simplify the complex. I don't think people don't have the mental bandwidth nowadays. They don't have the time. They want to understand why something creates value so that they can sign up for it. And to me, again, it's really about being able to take the complex and making it simple.
Well, thanks.
So that's number one.
Yep, sure, go on.
Oh yeah, can I add more?
Well, it can't get too complex, but go on.
I won't get too complex. I'll simplify it into a 1, 2, 3, 4 model here. Number two, and again we touched on this a bit, is authenticity, right? So I think if you're a good marketer, you're able to articulate to your team and to the market what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, or your opportunities to growth, however I want to say it. I think if you want to be a good marketer, you just have to be candid with your team, with whoever you work with, your organization. Like, here's what I am deeply passionate and good about. Here's where I have challenges, and you're able to kind of rally people around that authenticity. To me, absolutely essential. The third, I'll stop at 3 because 3 is always a good number. I really do think that you have to be a good marketer. You have to be a realistic optimist. It is very easy to be a unrealistic optimist. Like trust me, I've seen enough innovation presentations to be that were as unrealistic as you possibly could get. From drones to robots to whatever. I've seen the unrealistic, but I think the difference between good and great and a marketer is someone who who can bring that kind of honest candor to something, hey, here's where the challenges are, but is able to like identify the problem, but optimistically build on it to a solution. And so that to me is always like a touchstone for me of a great marketer, is because it's very easy to be a critic. It's also very easy to be pie in the sky. It's also incredibly difficult to like merge those two into the same mind. And I think to me, that's one thing that really I look for as we interview people, as we try to develop ourselves and our team here at PDI, is how do we become realistic optimists to deliver, the promises that we're offering to, and the products that we offer to our customers. So those are three things. I'll stop at three, but those are three that I think about.
It's funny because they are simple, yet they are very complex, right? It's certainly simple to say and think about, but boy, is that complex to do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thanks to you so much for your time, Jake. I learned so much from you today.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Love talking to you, and, wish you all the best of luck. Love the podcast and all that you're trying to do for marketers everywhere.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.